Everything you've been taught about your powerlessness over reality, every limitation you've accepted, every dream you've abandoned because that's just how physics works, was a lie designed to keep you controllable. The most devastating betrayal in human history wasn't political, it wasn't economic, it was scientific, and it specifically targeted your consciousness, your potential, your ability to create the life you actually want. What I'm about to reveal will shatter everything you think you know about science, reality, and your own power, because the Copenhagen interpretation, taught in every physics classroom as settled science, wasn't created through scientific discovery. It was engineered by a coordinated network of institutions to hide the most explosive discovery in human history, that your consciousness doesn't just observe reality. Your consciousness creates reality through the same laws that govern quantum mechanics, and they've spent nearly a century making sure you never learned how to use this power. Every struggle in your life, financial stress, health problems, relationship difficulties, career limitations, exists because you've been systematically trained to use your consciousness as a limitation creation device instead of a reality transformation tool. Einstein's consciousness research that we uncovered suppressed to keep you powerless. Heisenberg's uncertainty breakthrough that we revealed buried to maintain your dependence on external authorities. But the Copenhagen conspiracy goes deeper than hiding individual discoveries. They redesigned physics education itself to program your mind with powerlessness. In the next 33 minutes, I'll expose exactly who orchestrated this century-long deception, why they needed to keep consciousness research hidden, and most importantly, I'll give you the complete method they've been hiding. The same method that an underground network of researchers has spent decades perfecting in secret. The method that can transform every area of your life by teaching your consciousness to work with quantum mechanics instead of against them. This is the trilogy finale. This is where everything we've discovered becomes the power to change your reality permanently. This is Hidden Architects. The final betrayal is about to be exposed, and your consciousness liberation begins now. Here's what they never tell you in physics class. The Copenhagen interpretation wasn't discovered. It was manufactured. While Einstein was documenting how consciousness influences quantum systems, and Heisenberg was proving that uncertainty creates space for consciousness to shape reality, a very different agenda was taking shape in Copenhagen. Niels Bohr wasn't just disagreeing with Einstein and Heisenberg about quantum mechanics. He was being funded to create a version of quantum physics that would strip consciousness of all power over physical reality. Every limitation you've accepted about what's scientifically possible in your life traces back to this deliberate manipulation of scientific truth. The institutions funding Bohr's research had one requirement. Quantum mechanics must never suggest that individual human consciousness has power over reality. Everything else was negotiable. The Copenhagen Institute operated more like a social engineering project than a research facility. Government contracts required that quantum research focus exclusively on weapons and technology, never on human consciousness development. Corporate funding came with explicit requirements that quantum mechanics remain safely within materialist frameworks that wouldn't threaten existing business models or suggest people could solve problems through consciousness instead of products. Academic funding demanded that physics maintain absolute separation from psychology, consciousness studies, or anything suggesting humans weren't powerless victims of circumstances. Every aspect of what became mainstream physics was carefully designed to ensure you would never discover your consciousness abilities. But here's what's truly insidious. They didn't just hide consciousness research. They actively programmed you to believe consciousness research was unscientific. Every time you've thought, "That's not how reality works," about manifestation, consciousness healing, or reality creation, that thought was installed by Copenhagen conditioning. The most devastating part of the Copenhagen conspiracy was how they rewrote physics education to program limitation into every student's mind. Instead of teaching quantum mechanics as the science of consciousness-reality interaction, they taught it as pure mathematics with no personal implications. Instead of exploring what quantum effects reveal about human potential, students learned to calculate quantum behaviors while never questioning what those behaviors meant for their own lives. By the 1960s, an entire generation of physicists had been trained to believe that asking questions about consciousness was unscientific, but the programming went deeper than professional physics. Popular science education was designed to make you believe that quantum effects only happen at microscopic scales and have no relevance to your daily experience. Every documentary, textbook, and science class that taught you quantum mechanics was too weird to apply to real life was continuing the Copenhagen programming. The goal was simple: convince you that the most powerful tools for reality creation were either impossible or irrelevant to your actual problems. And for nearly a century it worked perfectly, until now. Understanding why consciousness quantum research was suppressed requires understanding what was at stake in your life specifically. If you could influence reality through consciousness principles, you wouldn't need pharmaceutical companies to fix your health problems. You wouldn't need financial institutions to create your security. You wouldn't need entertainment industries to provide fulfillment. Most threatening of all, you wouldn't need political systems to solve societal problems because you could create solutions through consciousness development. Every monthly payment you make, health insurance, medications, therapy, financial services, entertainment subscriptions, exists because you believe you're powerless to create health, security, and fulfillment through consciousness. The Copenhagen interpretation wasn't just academic theory. It was economic programming designed to keep you dependent on external authorities for everything consciousness could provide naturally. Your student loans, your medical bills, your therapy costs, your financial stress, all of it depends on you believing consciousness has no power over physical reality. But the economic implications were just the beginning of what they needed to hide from you. Political systems require citizens who believe they need external authority to manage their lives, solve their problems, and create their security. If consciousness could influence reality through quantum principles, then you wouldn't be dependent on governments for safety, prosperity, or problem-solving. Government funding agencies made it absolutely clear that quantum mechanics research must focus on military and technological applications. Consciousness applications were not just discouraged, they were explicitly forbidden and defunded. Meanwhile, classified military research into consciousness quantum connections continued in secret, developing advanced techniques for psychological warfare, remote influence, and consciousness-based intelligence gathering. The goal was to develop consciousness techniques for military advantage while ensuring that civilian populations remained completely ignorant about consciousness potential. This created a two-tier system. Government and military agencies possessed advanced consciousness reality interaction methods, while you were taught that consciousness had no power over physical reality. The Copenhagen conspiracy isn't just historical. It's actively limiting your life every single day. Every time you struggle financially instead of applying consciousness principles to create abundance, that's Copenhagen programming. Every time you accept health problems instead of using consciousness techniques for healing, That's Copenhagen conditioning. Every time you feel powerless over your circumstances, instead of recognizing your consciousness as a reality creation tool, that's the Copenhagen interpretation controlling your mind. The suppression of consciousness research has kept you trapped in limitation patterns that consciousness science proved were completely unnecessary decades ago. Social systems that profit from your problems, healthcare, finance, entertainment, politics, all depend on you believing the Copenhagen lie that consciousness is irrelevant to physical reality. But here's what they never anticipated. Consciousness, like quantum information, has its own momentum toward truth. The same principles they tried to hide from humanity are now proving impossible to suppress permanently. And every person who discovers consciousness quantum principles weakens their control over everyone else. Your consciousness awakening isn't just personal transformation, it's the end of their power over humanity. By the early 1950s, the underground network continuing Einstein and Heisenberg's work had achieved results so dramatic that institutional suppression became desperate. In controlled laboratory conditions, trained consciousness practitioners were demonstrating measurable influence over quantum systems, biological processes, and physical reality in ways that shattered every assumption of Copenhagen physics. Documented cases included consciousness practitioners altering radioactive decay rates, influencing random number generators with statistical significance that defied chance, and demonstrating measurable effects on biological systems through focused intention alone. Most threatening of all, they had developed systematic training protocols that could teach these abilities to ordinary people within weeks. The implications were staggering. If consciousness could influence physical systems through quantum principles, then every limitation taught by mainstream science was a lie. These weren't isolated incidents or statistical anomalies. They were repeatable, measurable, scientifically documented demonstrations that consciousness operates as a quantum measurement device, capable of collapsing probability fields into specific outcomes. The institutional response to these breakthrough results reveals just how threatened they were by consciousness research. Funding for consciousness quantum research was immediately terminated across all major universities. Research facilities were closed, equipment was confiscated, researchers were discredited and their careers destroyed. Academic journals established policies automatically rejecting any research connecting consciousness to quantum mechanics. Professional conferences banned consciousness researchers from presenting findings. Most effectively, they launched a coordinated campaign to associate consciousness research with pseudoscience and New Age mysticism rather than legitimate scientific inquiry. The goal was to ensure that consciousness quantum research could never again threaten existing power structures by proving human beings weren't powerless victims of circumstances. But the underground network had already documented everything. The complete method for consciousness reality interaction had been developed, tested, and proven effective. They just had to wait for the right moment to reveal it safely. That moment is now. Based on nearly a century of hidden research, here's how consciousness quantum interaction actually works. Your consciousness operates as a quantum measurement device that's constantly collapsing probability fields into specific experiences. Most people do this unconsciously, which means they're unconsciously creating limitation, struggle, and problems by measuring current difficulties into greater probability. But consciousness trained in quantum principles can learn to deliberately measure desired outcomes into manifestation while working with natural uncertainty rather than against it. This isn't mystical manifestation. This is consciousness applying the same principles that govern quantum particle behavior to personal reality creation. The method involves 5 integrated phases that decades of underground research have proven create dramatic life transformation. The first phase teaches you to recognize the difference between forced measurement and quantum measurement. Forced measurement happens when consciousness tries to control specific outcomes through anxiety, desperation, or rigid attachment to particular methods. This creates quantum resistance and unpredictable results. Quantum measurement happens when consciousness focuses on desired outcomes while maintaining what Einstein called relaxed confidence and Heisenberg called gentle uncertainty. You learn to develop probability sensitivity, the ability to sense when reality is ready for specific changes and when to apply consciousness focus versus when to allow natural timing. Practitioners report that this phase alone eliminates most struggle and resistance from their lives because they stop fighting against probability currents and learn to flow with quantum enhancement fields. Phase 2 develops your ability to sense and align with probability enhancement fields, domains of increased likelihood around desired outcomes. This involves learning to recognize the difference between fighting against probability currents versus flowing with probability enhancements towards your goals. Most people unconsciously align with limitation probability fields because that's what they focus on and expect. Quantum consciousness learns to deliberately align with abundance, health, success, and fulfillment, probability fields. This requires training consciousness to measure desired futures as already emerging rather than measuring current limitations as permanent reality. Underground network practitioners documented dramatic improvements in career opportunities, relationship quality, health conditions, and financial situations within weeks of mastering reality field navigation. Phase 3 masters what Heisenberg discovered about uncertainty being creative space rather than limitation. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty from your life, which only creates more resistance and unpredictability, you learn to use uncertainty as the domain where new possibilities can emerge. This involves practicing collaborative uncertainty, conscious participation in reality creation that respects natural laws and timing while enhancing probability flows toward desired outcomes. Practitioners learn to hold clear intention while remaining genuinely open to methods, timing, and pathways that exceed their current imagination. The results often appear miraculous: synchronicities, unexpected opportunities, and impossible solutions emerging naturally from uncertainty space. The research network discovered that consciousness quantum effects amplify exponentially when multiple people align their awareness towards similar outcomes. This isn't group manifestation mysticism. This is applied quantum mechanics using consciousness coherence to enhance probability fields. When groups of people focus on similar positive outcomes while maintaining quantum uncertainty principles, the probability enhancement effects multiply rather than just add. This explains why certain social movements create impossible changes in remarkably short timeframes. They're unconsciously applying collective consciousness quantum principles. Phase 4 teaches systematic protocols for consciousness collaboration that amplify individual abilities while contributing to collective positive outcomes. The final phase involves reality co-creation, consciousness working in partnership with quantum mechanics to continuously create optimal experiences. This isn't about controlling reality or forcing outcomes. It's about aligning consciousness with the natural creative principles that govern quantum mechanics and applying those principles to life experience. Practitioners report that reality becomes increasingly responsive to consciousness as these skills develop, creating what appears to be miraculous synchronicity but is actually natural consciousness quantum interaction. The underground network documented practitioners experiencing dramatic improvements in health, relationships, career success, creative abilities, and overall life satisfaction through systematic consciousness quantum training. Advanced practitioners describe living in a reality where limitations become opportunities, problems become stepping stones, and desired outcomes emerge naturally through consciousness collaboration with quantum possibilities. This is what's been hidden from humanity for nearly a century. This is your birthright as a conscious being in a quantum universe. The suppression of consciousness quantum research hasn't ended with the Copenhagen interpretation. It's evolved into more sophisticated methods specifically designed to keep you from discovering these abilities. Modern academic funding systematically avoids consciousness quantum research, instead channeling quantum mechanics toward technological applications that maintain existing power structures. Pharmaceutical research actively avoids studying consciousness techniques that might reduce dependence on medications for problems consciousness can address directly. Educational systems continue teaching the Copenhagen interpretation as settled science, while presenting consciousness research as unscientific speculation, exactly as planned nearly a century ago. Media representation consistently portrays consciousness-reality interaction as New Age nonsense rather than legitimate scientific inquiry with decades of documented results. Most effectively, the sheer complexity and mathematical sophistication of quantum mechanics keeps most people from ever questioning what it might mean for personal empowerment. But here's what's different now. The internet has made hiding information impossible. The suppression strategy has shifted from hiding consciousness research to fragmenting it, academically marginalizing it, and keeping it practically inaccessible. Every day you're exposed to Copenhagen programming, designed to reinforce the belief that consciousness has no power over reality. Every time you see miraculous healing stories dismissed as placebo effects rather than consciousness quantum interaction. Every time you hear about manifestation techniques ridiculed as wishful thinking rather than practical quantum mechanics application. Every time successful people are explained through hard work and luck rather than consciousness reality creation skills. Every time you're told that changing your circumstances requires external action rather than consciousness development. This programming is so pervasive that most people never even question whether consciousness might have power over physical reality. But consciousness, like quantum energy, seeks natural expression. The same principles they tried to hide are now emerging through multiple channels, despite institutional resistance. Underground research has evolved into a global network of scientists, practitioners, and teachers who understand consciousness quantum interaction and are committed to sharing this knowledge responsibly. The time for hiding human consciousness potential is ending, and you're part of the generation that will reclaim what was stolen from humanity. Everything we've explored across these 3 episodes points to one revolutionary conclusion that changes everything about your life. Your consciousness is not a passive observer of reality. Your consciousness is a quantum measurement device that's constantly creating your experience through the same principles that govern particle behavior at the subatomic level. Every financial struggle you've experienced exists because you were trained to use consciousness as a limitation creation device instead of an abundance creation tool. Every health problem you've accepted as just genetics or aging exists because you never learned consciousness techniques for biological system optimization. Every relationship difficulty you've endured exists because you weren't taught consciousness skills for probability enhancement around love, connection, and compatibility. Every career limitation you've experienced exists because you never discovered how consciousness can create opportunities, synchronicities, and lucky breaks through quantum field navigation. Einstein's consciousness research showed that mind and matter are fundamentally connected through quantum fields. Heisenberg's uncertainty experiments revealed how consciousness uses uncertainty as creative space for possibility manifestation. The Copenhagen conspiracy demonstrated that this knowledge was systematically hidden because it represents the greatest threat to systems that profit from human powerlessness. But now you know the complete picture, and knowing changes everything. The consciousness abilities that were hidden from you aren't mystical powers. They're natural functions of consciousness operating according to quantum principles. Reality responds to consciousness according to the same laws that govern quantum mechanics. You can learn to consciously participate in this process instead of creating limitation through unconscious quantum measurement. The 5-phase method I've shared represents decades of careful research, testing, and refinement by scientists who risked their careers to preserve this knowledge. Quantum consciousness calibration teaches your awareness to work with probability rather than against it. Reality field navigation shows you how to align with enhancement fields around desired outcomes. Uncertainty optimization transforms the unknown from threat to creative space. Collective consciousness amplification multiplies your individual abilities through coherence with others. Reality co-creation mastery integrates everything into natural consciousness quantum partnership. This isn't theory. This is practical application of scientific principles that can transform every area of your life. The underground network documented thousands of practitioners achieving what appeared to be miraculous results through systematic consciousness quantum training. But here's what the Copenhagen conspiracy never anticipated. When conscious people connect and share their reality creation experiences, the collective consciousness amplification becomes unstoppable. Your consciousness awakening isn't just personal transformation. It's participation in the end of nearly a century of systematic suppression of human potential. Every person who discovers consciousness quantum principles weakens the suppression system that has kept humanity limited and dependent. If this trilogy has awakened something in you, if you can feel your consciousness stirring with possibilities you never imagined, then you're ready to join something extraordinary. I'm not just talking about subscribing to a channel. I'm talking about joining a community of consciousness pioneers who are actively reclaiming human potential from a century of suppression. Right now, in the comments below, thousands of people are sharing their consciousness awakening moments, their reality creation experiments, and their liberation from limitation programming. Here's what I need from you specifically. Comment below with consciousness awakened if you're ready to start applying the 5-phase method we revealed. Because I'm about to share something exclusive with this community that will accelerate your consciousness development beyond anything you've imagined. Over the next 30 days, I challenge you to apply one phase of the consciousness quantum method and document your results in our community. Share your quantum consciousness calibration experiences, document your reality field navigation breakthroughs, report your uncertainty optimization discoveries. Every testimony you share breaks the suppression programming for someone else. Every breakthrough you document proves that consciousness research works in the real world. The institutions that profit from your limitation Healthcare systems that keep you sick, financial systems that keep you dependent, educational systems that keep you ignorant, political systems that keep you powerless, all depend on you believing consciousness has no power over reality. But you now possess knowledge that Einstein discovered, Heisenberg developed, and an underground network has refined through decades of careful experimentation. This trilogy represents more than scientific education. It's consciousness liberation from nearly a century of systematic disempowerment. You now understand that every limitation you've accepted was programmed. Every dream you've abandoned was surrendered to Copenhagen conditioning. Every problem you've endured was maintained by consciousness suppression. But that ends today. If you've made it through this entire trilogy, you're not just a viewer. You're part of the consciousness liberation movement that ends nearly a century of systematic disempowerment. Subscribe and join our consciousness community. Share your awakening story in the comments. Connect with others who are reclaiming their reality creation birthright. Your consciousness operates according to quantum principles. Reality responds to consciousness through quantum field interactions. You can learn to consciously create instead of unconsciously limiting. The choice, like everything in quantum mechanics, depends on the observer. And that observer is you. The conspiracy is revealed, the method is delivered, your consciousness birthright is reclaimed. And get ready for what's coming next. Advanced consciousness protocols, where we'll reveal the most powerful techniques the underground network has developed for reality transformation. The Copenhagen conspiracy is ending. Your consciousness revolution is beginning. This is Hidden Architects. Welcome to your power. Now let's change reality together.